All right, my name is Jeff with Big Hairy Dog, and this is a PhD webinar on version 9 tech support. You guys are all connected. I can see you. I can unmute anybody who wants to be unmuted. I'm actually pretty happy to do that. Anybody who wants to be unmuted, just raise your hand, or I can unmute people if we think that there's not going to be too much confusion with the whole sound problems, right? There's also a chat box. Feel free to hit the chat box. I try to keep an eye on the chat box, ask questions. I'm guessing you guys can all hear me, right? Looks like my audio is coming through fine on my side. So um, there's our outline right here for V9 tech support. So some of the basics, and I've got a machine here that I pulled up in the background, which is a nice example of of um, a good box here. So let's dive into that and take a look. And excellent, we have a question here. Thank you very much, Tim. Appreciate the feedback. So I thought I could be heard, but it's awkward when you're talking to yourself. You know what I mean? Um, all right. So the reason I picked this one because I was checking it out the other day and I noticed some things on it that I probably need to be cleaned up, and I did not clean them up. And so first off, you got a Retail Pro and you've got Oracle. The data now lives in Oracle in version 9, and the Retail Pro is, of course, where our dock designs and our screen designs and all the functionality of Retail Pro lives, but the actual data lives in Oracle. So the first thing is to check your drive space. That's a great point, by the way. Can't see your screen. Good call. Thank you. Excellent. Perfect. Thank you very much, you guys. I'm, I'm feeling a little awkward on that one. And which screen am I sharing? You guys can see this here now. So you can see this one with the drives here. I think I'm gonna flip it over and show that one right there. Okay, so thank you guys. It's good to know you guys got my back. I'm just gonna say it's appreciated. Yes. Can you see what we got here? Okay, so we're good, right? So let's start over here. So first off, if I just open up my computer, or if I just go into like boom, the computer, and my data is on the D drive. So I'm opening the D drive, right? So first off, one of the very first things you should always check is your drive space, right? Now this one, we've got plenty of room here, right? We're not pushing space at all, but I'll tell you why in a second. You always want to check your drive space first. Like out of the gate, you want to make sure that your drive space um, has plenty. Now, uh, inside here, we've got a Retail Pro 9 folder. We got an Oracle folder, right? The data's in Oracle. Retail Pro's got all of its stuff in here. Let's go into the Oracle folder for a second. And in the Oracle folder, we have an Aura Data folder. And an Aura Data folder, that is the database. So that's the real database where the stuff is. So um, if we go into Aura Data, you'll see the name of our database, which is RPro ODS. Now I've renamed it. I dropped in a copy and I renamed the database and dropped in my database at some point. So that's a blank version of this here, but normally you wouldn't see that. You just see the RPro ODS. Inside RPro ODS, you actually have the database files and you have the archive files. Now, archive files can go kind of crazy. So what I mean is that through our normal process of a backup, we delete the archive files every night, put them in, we back them up and delete them. So they should never be that big, right? So how big are my archive files in here? My archive files are sitting at 14.6 gigabytes. Okay, that's way too big for archive files. Now, if left unattended, these archive files will fill your hard drive up. They will fill your hard drive up completely. And it probably take less than a year to do. So like this machine, we don't do anything on this. This is just a sandbox. Like we make one transaction a month, maybe on this box. And the archive files are sitting at 14.6 gigabytes, right? Let's take a look at the archive files. So archive files here, we have them back to June, right? Now, archive files, what are they used for? Why are they here? Archive files are used to rebuild history. So if I had to restore a backup from 3 days ago and I had the archive files from the last 3 days, then in the Technician's Toolkit, I could use them to rebuild all the history. That's what archive files are for. So at any given moment, if you were down because your hard drive was full and you looked in your archive folder and said, man, I got way too many archive files, what do you really need here? You need like the last 30 days, right? So you could come down here and say, okay, this one here is from the 16th. Okay, I'll go back to 10/16-ish, right? And I could say, okay, from there back, I'm just going to take all those and delete them. Don't need them. You're never going to restore to a backup that old, right? So that's, for me, the first thing to look at. If your hard drive is full and you're down, man, the first thing to look at is the archive files. I mean, I would not delete all the archive files. I would always keep certainly the last 3 days or 4, maybe 7 days. But if you've got like a year's worth of archive files out there, you don't need that. Drop it down to 30 days for sure. So right out of the gate, that would save a ton of space. Now we were at 14.6 gigabytes. Now we're at 2.6. So we just dropped 12 gigabytes. That's plenty to operate your computer on. How often should you purge the archives? Good question. Excellent, excellent question. So let's talk about the purging of the archives. Now, if you're running a backup, so let's go take a quick peek in Retail Pro 9. Do I have what I'm looking for in here? I don't know. This is a sandbox and we don't do normal backups in here. Let me see if I have what we're looking for on my side real fast. So the bottom line is that while I look for this file, that our backup should be doing this for us. So normally we don't recommend, like, we don't have to back up every remote out there, but we do actually. We set up backups at the remotes. Now they're shallow backups. What I mean is they don't have the same depth. They don't keep 14 backups at a remote. We keep 1, maybe 2, right? We just keep enough so that we can keep the process rolling. So I would say you need to clean out the archive files on a regular basis, but if your backup is doing that for you, then you don't need to, right? If your backup has already taken care of that, then you're good. And so if I can find the backup file that I was looking for, which I think I can, here's a version of it right here. That's not what I'm looking for. Oh, that is it right there. Copy that. And let's just paste that right into here. Paste into here. Okay, so that I just copied and pasted in a script right here. We're going to go ahead and it's a batch file and edit it real quick so we can see what it looks like. So normally this is very similar to the kind of backup we run. So at the top here, I'm just going to point at the big sections. There's our variables. So we get to set how many days we're keeping, where it's being backed up to, right? What the password is to get in to do the backup. This here erases one backup that's older than the number of days. This here makes a new backup and puts it in the folder. This just restarts all the services. That's all that's going on there. And you can see right over here, it says backup archive, yes. Delete archive, yes. Right? So it backs up the archive, stuffs them in there, and deletes them. So the question is the purge by machine or by server? It's by server. It's by site. It's by each installation, right? Not by each workstation. Now this particular one, you point out, is yes, this is a workstation and a server. This is a standalone sandbox. It is its only workstation to itself, right? So you are correct on that. Yeah, so the remotes, and Kat points out that hers is set to keep 1 day. The remotes I would set to keep 1 day. Okay. The remotes I don't need 7 days. I just need 1. I mean, if the remote, especially if they have one store, if their hard drive goes, it's going to take the hard drive. It's going to take the backup with it, right? So if the thing gets corrupted and I got one backup at the remote, then that's one opportunity to restore the backup without having to re-push all the data from the main. But I mean, I can always, the main is always backing up the remote store. It's just going to take longer to build the thing back out, right? That's all. So that's totally fine. Yes, and both of you, by the Catherine and Tim, you both asked the same exact question. Both very observant. It is by site though, by store. So if you have 5 workstations in a store, it is definitely by the one server. So if you're on the server looking at the R drive and that's what you're saying, and you're at the remote or the main. If you're at the main, then you should have multiple backups, like 7 or 14. The main I would keep at least 7. I want a week's worth of backup. I mean, if you're restoring a backup, you don't want to go old. You want to go as snooty as you can. But if a file got infected and it turns out yesterday's backup is infected, I want another option. I want to be able to go back one more day, right? Or one more day beyond that. So if the main, and I mean the hub of the wagon wheel, right? If you have multiple stores, so and when we always think of polling, right? Can we get it to type here? When we think of polling, we always think of it in terms of a wagon wheel, where the main is the hub, right? So if you have multiple stores, and apparently I can't get Paint to come up here, but you get what I'm talking about, right? If you got a hub of a wagon wheel and you've got multiple stores, the stores are the spokes, and the main office is the hub, right? That's just our model for polling. It's a solid model. It works very well. If this store wants to talk to any other store, it talks to it through the main, right? So the main location, the main store, we want to keep at least 7 backups. But at the remote stores, 1 would be fine, right? You could have 1 on all these guys here. Because really, you just want to maintain the archive files, right? That's really it. And then have a nice little thing. I have the file, but mine says echo off instead of any insight there. Yes, echo off just means don't repeat the commands. That's all it means. So echo off, if I run this batch file here, I'm going to see all these commands pop up in the command window. That's all. Echo off means just don't repeat all these commands you're about to see. So it just runs pretty. That's what all echo off means. Excellent question, though. All right, so where does that leave us here? So check drive space, reboot, absolutely reboot. Always, I mean, almost always I would start with rebooting. Now, rebooting basically restarts the services, right? That's what rebooting does, but it also clears the memory. So if you're at all worried about the computer, restarting may not be the best choice. Do a formal shutdown, count to 10, fire it back up, right? Let the energy, let the electricity drain from the memory cell completely. That'll clear any internal messages or errors that are going on with memory allocation. And many errors are caused by bad memory usage, right? So one of the first steps is to reboot and drop it all the way down. Give it a few seconds, not even 10 probably. Fire it back up. Now, another option short of that would be to restart the services, right? So let's go take a look at services. So on this machine here, if I type in services, since it seems to be responding now, and we open up the services. So I just went to the Windows little window button there. It popped into the little search box. I typed services, and for whatever reason, it's running really slow today. Probably because it's running music for the office at the same time. In here, these are all Windows services that are running in the background, right? Some are running, some are not. You can see which ones are running right here, right? So if we go down to the O's and look in Oracle, I'm interested in 3 services. 2 of them are right here. So this one here, our Oracle service, RPro ODS. Now our RPro ODS, that is the database, RPro ODS, right? That is the database that we're running. So that is the service running the database. So that's the big kahuna, so to speak. If that one's down, you're done. You're not getting into the database. Now, to get into the database, you have a listener. The listener has to also be running. That's the catcher. That's accepting these incoming connections, right? So we have to have our database up and our listener up minimum. Now, I don't need this other stuff like these other Oracle services don't necessarily need to be running, right? These aren't right here, and it's not hurting me at all. Now, the other thing you need though is down here in the R's, and that's the Retail Pro license server. So there is our license server right there, and that is also running. If any one of those three are down, we're in trouble. Now, this box also has Retail Pro Prism on it, and you can see a lot of Prism functionality here that's running as well. We don't care about that for our conversation today. For Retail Pro 9, you need three things running. Now, I guess we should go through a normal shutdown and restart of those things, because if you want to shortcut restarting the machine, and now a server can take a couple of minutes to restart. Unfortunately, it can take 5 or 10 minutes to restart. It might be faster to drop the services. In fact, it will be faster to drop the services. So I'm gonna, well, if I right click, all right, let's just do it, we don't care. I'm gonna right click this and hit stop. That's how a licensed server should shut down. It should be about a second or two. If that thing hangs, shutting down, then one of two things, you need to do one of two things. You need to either go to the task manager and shut it down. So I could go, if I go back here and start this back up again, start, it should start about the same way, by the way, lightning fast. But you could also, if it's jammed up, you could go into the task manager, and in the task manager, look for the license server. So there it is right there. Right there's the license server. I could shut it down here too. Now, sometimes shutting it down here unclogs it, releases the error in memory, then you fire it back up and it works fine, and sometimes it doesn't. I'm just going to tell you, sometimes you got to restart the machine. Usually if there's a problem with the services, it is the license server that's hanging for some reason, and it usually requires a restart if that's the case. So we're going to slide back up to the O's here. I'm going to go ahead and stop the listener. Now it's pissed off, or Prism's pissed off. So you normally, unless you have Prism, you won't see all those other things stopping. It'll normally stop and start about the same as the license server. Very fast, in fact. So this is taking an extra second because Prism is also tied to Retail Pro 9, and it's having to stop all the Prism services too. In that respect, this wasn't a great example, but I just thought it'd be nice to have Prism on here in case we ended up having questions in that direction. And now I'm wondering if that was a good decision. We could start all that stuff up if we need to. I'm not going to worry about it. As soon as it gets shut down, that is. Now the Oracle database, the RPro ODS, that will take maybe 30, 40 seconds to shut down, and that is completely normal, and it's quite common. I looked at my company server, and the only archive files are for early this morning. That's correct. That's exactly. If you looked at your server and the only archive files you have are the ones from today, that means your backup ran. It backed up the archive files and it deleted them so that every day you start fresh. That's exactly right. So the other archive files are in your backups. Excellent question. But that's exactly how it should be working. Right. That is normal. That is, otherwise, I mean, like I said, I've had tech calls. I've had many tech calls, more than I could count. I mean, not like hundreds, but like dozens. And it's always because the archive files just run amok. They just go crazy and they fill the hard drive up. Or the backups run amok and there's no deleting of backups, and the backups run amok and they fill the hard drive up, right? Anyway, so if I come back here and I start this, okay, that's how it should shut down, right? It should stop that fast. Boom, just like that. That's if you don't have Prism installed and you don't have 12 other tasks tied to the listener, right? Then it should shut down in seconds. Now, the RPro ODS will never shut down like that. This will never be fast. This will always be a few seconds. And if it's shutting down too quickly, that's probably not a good sign. But this is a very handy way to basically put Oracle to sleep, let go of all the memory Oracle's using, fire it back up. Now, when we fire it back up, we've got to be careful because Oracle needs time to set up. So if we could get this thing to stop and then we could start it again, maybe I could try and get in too soon and get the error that I don't want you to get, right? So know that it needs a minute, I would say a minute and a half to be ready to accept connections. So when we right click this and we say start, and it's going to take another 40 seconds to start this thing up, right? Then we start the listener and the license server. Then just hit your phone, hit your timer, and hit start the counter, right? Because once you hit that license server and you start it up, if you try and get right into Retail Pro, it's going to say it failed, connection to Oracle failed. That's what's going to happen. And so if you just restarted the service and then you try to start too soon, then you think you screwed up and you restart the services, but all you had to do is wait 30 more seconds and you'd be fine, right? It would have been beautiful. So come on, you can do it. All right, come on. This is the big one though. This is the hard one to start and stop, right? So this one's now running. Now we right click and start that, boom. That thing starts right up. We scroll down here to license server. We right click, we start that. Oh, it's already running, nice. We already started it, fine. It's probably, so let's just do this. Let's stop it. I don't trust that I'll get the error unless I just restart this. So right there, right, then I normally would just, I would hit start and turn my counter on, right? So I would know how long it had been. Now I'm gonna try and get into Retail Pro, having just restarted that. I'm trying to get the error, obviously, here in this case. We're at 20 seconds since I restarted the license server. We're just hitting 30 seconds, come on. Right, initialization failed. RPro is unable to communicate with the database. Please ensure the database has been started or contact your technical support for assistance. Right, so if you try to get in too soon, right after restarting your services, it will not work. I'm just gonna tell you, it won't work. Then you have to go in here and shut down so that thing's locked up now, right? So this thing, we just got to shut this down, get it out of there. Retail Pro 9, got to get rid of it. So now we're pushing a minute 21 seconds. I'm going to give it till a minute 30 here. All right, we're bumping up against a minute 30 since I restarted the license server. So we'll double click Retail Pro and see if we can get in now, right? Yeah, it's a good question. Tim says it seems much easier to just restart the machine. In this case, you probably are right, actually. Well, this one has Prism on it. So if we had not had Prism, it would have been the stop and the start would have been very quick. So it would be about 2 minutes roughly to restart the services. And this machine would probably take around the same time to reboot. So you're probably right there, Tim. The exception would be a full server. Like if you were in a bigger store and you had a full like Dell server, the Dell server is going to take 5 or 10 minutes to restart. So when you get to the server class machine, it actually is probably faster to restart the services than it is to do a shutdown of the entire server. But, you know, if you shut down the services and then you bring them back up and it still doesn't work, then you're faced with doing a restart anyway, right? So, you know, it might be better to bite the bullet and just restart the machine, right? That's kind of a good point. I can tell you though that I've done a lot of tech calls. I'm not in normal tech. I do training and report building mostly, but I do my fair share of tech support. I was on this weekend, and I do a lot of taken a lot of situations and I've restarted the services and got them back in. And so I usually go there first because it's usually pretty fast. If you don't have Prism installed, it's like I said, a minute and a half, 2 minutes tops. You've restarted the services, then you just got your counter going. Another minute, you can get into Retail Pro. They're back up. Restarting the machine, it's going to take more, 5 or 10 minutes probably. So I don't know. That's a tough call on a regular standalone remote with one machine. Normal RAM, normal machine, restarting is probably not 5-10 minutes. I don't know. Yes, good call. It is still quicker than calling for tech support. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. These are all things I would do before you call tech support, right? I would always make sure that, like, it's not a big deal, but you don't want to call tech support only to have me find that your drive is full. If your drive is full, then you're out of space. It's not going to work. I mean, so check your drive space, restart the computer for sure, shut down the services maybe, right? Those are all things ideally we would do before calling tech support, right? Obviously, check your archive files, connecting the client to the server. Well, all right, so that's kind of weird though for you guys. It's not a bad thing to see though. So in Oracle, how do I know where this client is connecting to find the database? Okay. In Oracle, there are two folders here, the ODS folders. There's the client folder and the regular folder, right? Now, if you're a client, you'll have both folders, but this one will be almost empty. It'll have like 3 subfolders. This is not a client. This is a regular database, right? So it's pretty full. So in either case, though, if you go into the regular one or the client one, and then you go to the network folder and the admin folder, right? So you go to the ODS folder of your choosing, network admin, you will find the TNS names and the listener. Now in the client, there's only a TNS names, right? But either one of these files, if you open it, it's a listener.aura, TNS names.aura, and you can open these in Notepad because they are just text files. This is where you find how the client connects to Oracle. So, if you're having trouble connecting to the database and you're not sure where it's connecting, this is how you know, right? You just go check here. You can find in here the name of the machine. This is the name of this machine, or the IP address could be in there. Either one, it wouldn't matter, right? And then of course the port that Oracle uses, which is 1521. That's correct. Right. Same thing here in the TNS names. And if I go into the client folder again, network, admin, I find the TNS names, right? And it's got the same exact data. That's how clients connect to Oracle. So Oracle really doesn't need a mapped drive. We use a mapped drive in many cases for plugins and for sharing doc designs and a lot of other good reasons, right? But we don't really need it. Oracle will find it all on its own. Obviously, checking power cables, right? Always check your power cables. Always plug in all your cables. If you have a peripheral failure, check the cables. I had a guy yell at me once. I asked him to check the cable on the keyboard. And he started freaking out and yelling, and then he found the keyboard was in fact unplugged. It stopped mid scream. So, I mean, that's just the basics, right? You got to get that out of the way. Dumping the printer. Does everybody know how to dump a printer? It's a weird kind of phrase now that I think about it. I never really thought about it before, but it is kind of a weird phrase. All right, so dumping a printer means dumping the memory, really. So normally like on a regular, like a small receipt printer, like a Bixlon or one of the other ones we sell, right? You've got your basic small printer, right? And on the printer, then you typically have a little feed key right here with of course, the receipt paper comes out of the top, right? All right, so then we have like down here, typically a little toggle switch, right? That turns off and on the printer, right? And don't laugh at my art here, guys. Be nice to me. This is hard. Okay, so if we turn the printer off, right, all the way off, dead, off, we hold down the feed key. We turn the printer on and wait for a couple of seconds. It should start spitting out receipt paper, and it'll basically dump the memory and spit out its BIOS. It'll tell you what program it's on, what version of the flash memory, etc. Right? It'll dump all that stuff out, right? And then typically when it finishes, you want to hit the feed key one more time. Says many times it'll come out in sort of two phases. It'll come out with all the data about what's going on in the printer. Then you hit the feed key again and it does a test pattern that looks a little bit like a barbershop, you know what I mean? Like they'll print the alphabet in the same order, but it'll shift over one character. And so it'll come out in this little pattern. And then once it finishes that, typically it's done, right? So if you're having trouble printing, the first thing I would do is dump the printer. Just turn it off, hold the feed key down, turn it back on. Now laser printers is a little different. Many of the laser printers have a menu, and on the menu there's a place where it says reset the printer. So you want to do it based on that. Little cheap receipt printers, typically you just turn them off, hold the feed key, turn them back on, let go. And that'll dump the memory. And then what can happen, and you may want to check this, is you may want to go down and go to your printers section, right? If you go to printers on any given Windows machine, and I don't even know what I have in here, and I don't know why it's running like a snail's pace, but the point is there's a print queue in there. All right, so wow, all right. So print queue, open queue, right? There's not going to be anything in this queue. But if you've had a trouble printing and you've been frustrating and you've sent 26 print jobs to the printer, what's going to happen when you dump that memory? Yeah, all 26 print jobs are going to start firing one after the other. So if you don't want to be surprised by the printer going completely nuts, check the print queue on that printer, right? Find the printer in the list, open the queue, see what's in there. You can go in and say, like cancel these jobs, right? Or there's different options here, cancel all documents, right? So you could minimize the impact on that, just FYI. All right, back to work here, right? Okay, workstation preferences. Yes, that's always good. Yes, we gotta go there. So in options, workstation preferences, I mean, a common problem is, I'll just go right to the juggler here. We'll just jump right on it. If you have a receipt printer set up incorrectly, that's one of the most common tech calls we get. I mean, people call in and say, it's asking me questions. So like, for instance, if I had this checked off as active, right? And then down here, I had a regular receipt printer of some kind. Say that's a receipt printer. And I had the receipt printer set up and I had a design file that I was using and I had paper size that I was using. And this one's all dialed in, right? But this one here is just active with nothing set up. It's going to try and do 2 print jobs. And this one has no design file. So it's going to prompt every time, right? Unfortunately, you can't tell, like here, when you're on your receipt printer, you can't tell if anything else is active unless you scroll through the menu. You got to check every printer in here, right? To know you got 2 of them that are active. It's awkward. The other thing is that if you're setting it up and you don't define this, or you check these buttons off, right? If you check these buttons off, you're going to get menus popping up, right? That's how that works. So that's the most common error we see with workstation preferences, but obviously other things, like, and of course you got to make sure that all these are set correctly. I guess we should finish printing and then we'll go to peripherals. The other ones that can get you is like you do a debit card, you haven't done a debit card in a while, and this thing is enabled up here. So, and it doesn't know how to print. So debit cards should be disabled. right? We don't print anything out. Now, even credit cards today, we don't print the credit card draft anymore. We're done with that. They either sign the PIN pad or they don't sign at all, right? So for your printing preferences to be properly set up, you need to go to every print job. So the new receipt, the former receipt, if you take SO deposits, the SO deposits receipt, you got to go through these because you got to turn them off, right? The gift receipt has to be set up correctly. And then you want to disable any and all of these that you're have a chance of actually hitting. If you'd hit that function, if you do a paid out or a paid in, then you need to turn off the print jobs unless you want them to print, right? That's it. Not really rocket science. They do have a new node down there, a couple of new nodes in the newer versions that they just added. So if you ever have a need to print a held receipt, you can now go into the Doc Designer design one that says held receipt in big letters, and you could actually print a held receipt and you'd know it was held, right? Same for a return document. If you want a different design now for return documents, you can do that. So, all right, so then peripherals, you know, in here, I can't go through every scenario of every peripheral out there. Most people have a cash drawer. Cash drawer is set up one of two ways, with OPAS drivers or pass-through, right? Now, does everybody understand the difference? So you got a basic computer, right? And you have a printer, right? So the printer plugs into the computer, right? Now the cash drawer, if it's pass-through, if it's a Windows pass-through, this plugs into the printer, right? If it's OPAS and it's using a direct connection, it plugs directly into the computer, right? So this is OPAS. OPAS is a really old POS driver standard, right? And this is Windows pass-through, right? Where we're passing through the printer, right? And I cannot write in Paint, right? So you get the idea, right? I'm running out of space. But pass-through goes to the printer. We generally prefer OPAS because you have to install the OPAS driver and set it up, but then the cash drawer is on its own, right? If you lose the printer, you don't lose the cash drawer. So if you're using an OPAS one and you lose the printer, you could redirect your print job to a laser printer in the office temporarily for those people that have to have a receipt, right? And you'd still have a cash drawer. But sometimes, depending on the hardware, we have to go with pass-through, and pass-through works fine. There's really no downside to it other than the fact that if you lose the printer, you lose the cash drawer, right? So it's not a big deal. It's not going to happen every day. All right, so anything else in here we care about? Obviously, in the cash drawer area, once you turn this on, you decide what opens the cash drawer, right? So if you need it to open for credit cards or whatever, that's not something you should call tech support for. Just go in and turn on what you want it to open for, right? You know, the only other thing I would do maybe real quick is say that that in a shopper display situation, right, as well a line display or a shopper display, right? There's two kinds. There's the OPAS kind or standalone kind, I should say. These two are standalone, and this here is a pin pad. And the only thing I really want to say here is that because we're not going to configure one of these, but if you're using the pin pad, then you click on the Merchant Genius plugin, right, like that, right? And then you go up to the plugin interface and you turn on the settings inside the Cayenne plugin interface down here, right? So here's your line display settings if you're using the pin pad. That's about as deep as I want to go on that one. Now, I will mention that pin pads and line displays, probably two of the biggest culprits for what we would perceive as a lockup at point of sale. So since we bumped into the pin pad, let's finish the pin pad, right? When we go to receipt and we click new, at the moment we click new, Retail Pro performs a check. It goes out and checks the line display. It checks the pin pad. It checks the cash drawer. It checks the receipt printer, right? It wants to know that it's ready, right? So if you click new and it just hangs, like it locks up and you're not able to start a new transaction, more than likely, like that's not hanging, obviously. I'm already in the field, right? So, but if you can't get there and it's hanging, my first guess is it's the pin pad. My second guess is it's a standalone shopper display. But if your shopper display is your pin pad, it could be either, right? So next, what I would want to do is I'd want to just take a look at the settings for the pin pad real fast. I'm going to pop those up on the screen. So let me see if I can grab those real quick. All right. Okay. And so you might want to take a picture of this, what I'm about to bring up. I'm just going to say, that is not it. That is not the droid we're looking for. This is what I'm looking for right here. Yep, that's it right there. So, you know, what I would do immediately if I have that lockup situation, I would go over to the pin pad and do either this here with this password, and then I would tell it to restart. There's a reboot option in the menu. Or if the pin pad is in fact locked up, then you have to do this one. This is like a Control-Alt-Delete, right? It's like you hold down all three of these together, and you it pops up with a password. You put this password in, and then you see in the menus you see reboot, and you do a soft reboot, right? That's what those do. So this is information you guys should all have. May or may not have it already. I'll leave it up there for a second so you guys can take a picture of it because it's just handy to know. 000 enter, right? And you do have to type the enter key here, right? Right. But that's pretty obvious, I think. But anyway, and in both those options, you can get in and configure the pin pad, or you can restart the pin pad, and that'll probably resolve your lockup situation, especially if the pin pad is also the line display, right? So those are both good choices to know about. And if anybody needs that brought back up, let me know. We can bring that back up. Okay, so all right, so now I guess we're going to go play with Technician's Toolkit for a bit, and then we're going to look at polling. All right, woohoo! All right, so great. We've got max cash amount turned on. So tools, Technician's Toolkit. We're going to buzz through here real quick. Look at some settings in here that can be helpful. This is pretty boring stuff. Hopefully you guys do not fall asleep. But I get it if you do. Let's see here. Alerts are goofy. Be careful with those. They're just computer alerts. I've set them up in the past and I've not found them to be overly helpful, but you can play with that if you want to. Configuration, be very careful here. I followed the guide exactly and I blew the Oracle database up with this one. So and when you float over each of these, it tells you what the settings should be. And I followed the guidance on each of these little drop-down menus and set it up exactly how it is. Now I pretty much only mess with this one here. That's the only one I mess with. I don't mess with the other ones much. Maybe the other techs do. I don't really after blowing the database up. But Oracle will take as much memory as you give it, right? So if you want to run fast, you got to give Oracle some memory, right? So what does this computer have, right? If we're in, let's see here, if we're in here and we right click this PC and go to properties, what do we got here? I think I already know, but yeah, 8 gigabytes. We've got 8 gigabytes of memory, right? That's there. 7.89 usable because this little piece has been taken for the boot sector, whatever, right? So we're giving it half that. We're giving it 4,000 megabytes or 4 gigabytes, right? Which is normal. Give it half the memory you have, right? So Oracle can use up to 4 gigabytes. It doesn't necessarily mean it is using 4 gigabytes. What is Oracle using actually? You know, what is our memory allocation going on in here right now? Memory, who's number one? Well, Oracle's number one at just under a gigabyte, right? 900 megs. So I've seen it use 10 gigabytes. I've seen it use 3.5 on a regular basis. It just depends on what you're doing, how many people are hitting it, what's going on, right? We're not doing anything in it right now. We're sitting here idle, and it's using 900 megs. So, all right. So, diagnosis. People don't use diagnosis anymore. It's an old tool that was put in there for version 6, version 5. I don't know. It'll diagnose the whole computer. It'll tell you everything about the computer, and you can pull the diagnosis back to the main. We'll just dial into the damn thing, right? Just go out and get a remote software. There's this new Splashtop that's pretty cheap. There's LogMeIn. There's TeamViewer like we use. There's a plethora of remote software. Everybody should have access to all of their computers all the time. Like if I had a TeamViewer, all I need is one license. I can connect to more than one computer. The licensing takes place at the person doing the connecting, not the connectee. You follow? So I could be connected to multiple machines and only be using one license. In fact, I'm connected to multiple machines right now. This here is a TeamViewer connection right here, right? And this here's another one right here. That's my main desktop. So I'm connected to 2 different machines simultaneously. I'm using one TeamViewer license. So now TeamViewer is a little expensive. It's, I don't know, 50, 60 bucks a month. So it's, you know, 600 bucks a year if you get the two connections. And it's nice to have 2 connections, like one for the owner and one for the tech support people, so you can be doing 2 things at once. It's probably over $1,000 a year. So, and for us, we have, I don't know, 14 connections or something. I don't know even know what ours is. It's ridiculous, right? So sessions very handy. I hate to be the guy that uses this, but yes, you can go in and you could see somebody like there's our connection, right, for Technicians Toolkit, and you could disconnect it. Evil, but sometimes necessary. Hey, I need everybody out of the computer, and somebody up there just ignores you because what they're doing is more important than what you're doing. So bye-bye. Just disconnect them, drop them out of the software. Evil, but like I said, necessary. Reindexing and tuning, these are scheduled tasks. These are normal tasks. These should be going on in your scheduler every day, along with the backup, right? And to do them manually, you just click on one of these and you click start. I'm not going to waste our time. This machine's running too slow. It typically takes 30 seconds to index. It's not painful, maybe in a minute, right? Same with tuning, and the same with the Delta build, which we'll get to in a bit. Audit, have not used audit much, gotta say. Database tracing I have used. Don't play with database tracing unless you really know what you're doing. This will create verbose tracing files that will fill your hard drive up. I mean, it's brilliant when you're trying to find out why a report isn't working and you need to get into the trace files to find out why it's not accessing a certain field, which I've done with programmers before, but don't turn on the tracing files, right? Let's see, what else here is important? Don't play with the control file data files. We have had some cases of reports running slow, and Ken, the amazing and invincible, went out here and created a new temp report file. I don't even know where it was, but if you need help with that, that's something that Ken can do for you. If you think your reports are running too slow and you want another temp file, we can build one. FYI, I probably would have Ken do that, by the way. Backup and recovery, critical daily stuff. Everybody should know how to do a basic backup. And if everybody's still awake, if you have questions, feel free to pop them in there. I'm keeping an eye on the chat, or I can unmute you, no big deal either way. So a basic manual backup, right? You come into backup recovery, you start at options, start at the lowest level, make sure you've set up the backup. So I want to do a complete backup. Where are you doing this backup to? Pick a location where you want it to go. Now, if you have a backup folder, which would typically be DB backups, and it would be like on the root of the R drive, or in my case, the D drive, there would be a DB backups folder. Know that the DB backups folder is managed by the script that we looked at earlier, and anything you put in there will be deleted after 7 days or 14 days, right? So if your intention is to have it deleted after 14 days, great, drop it in there. If your intention is to keep this for a longer period of time and delete it when you're ready, don't put it in there, right? So you pick where you want. I'm just going to say install folder, boom. And then down here is the name. Now, what I typically do is I add some note on there. You can't put spaces or special characters. So if I was installing a plugin and I wanted to back up the database in case things went south, I could say pre-plugin right here, right? No spaces, no special characters, right? But that puts a little mark on your backup so you're 100% positive that's your backup, right? Now, if you're doing a long-term backup, you probably want to grab the archives. If you're doing a short-term, like if I was going to do a plugin, and I was going to test some new plugin, and I was afraid it was going to blow things up, and I wanted to have my backup, I'm either going to use that backup in about a half an hour, or I'm never going to use it, right? I'm not going to grab the archive files. I'm not going to back up an extra 2.6 gigabytes of data that I'm not going to need, right? And I would not, for a manual backup, do compression. I'm going to tell you, zipping a 4 gigabyte file is not going to be quick. It's going to be 10 or 20 minutes, right? So if you're in a hurry, don't compress. Just write the file. It'll take a blank database writes in about 3 minutes, and a bigger database like 4 or 5 minutes. It's really amazingly fast how fast it can write a backup. I do it, but I don't want to wait 3 minutes on a webinar. That'd be just painful beyond belief. So, but anyway, you set your settings up like that. You pop up the backup, you click start, it rock and rolls. It makes a backup. That's it. To restore that backup, you would go down to recovery. You would highlight the backup in the top, which we don't even have any. You would say what kind of backup it is. This would be from a complete backup. We always do complete backups. Then you have to say what drive path you're putting it to. So you highlight the backup. You say it's a complete. You click D. You click start. That's it. You got to be on the server. You can't do this from a client. Got to be on the server. I'm just going to underscore. You got to be on the server. Believe me, I've made that mistake on more than one occasion, and it's annoying. Then you have to bump into the server. When it finishes, it doesn't fully restart all the services, so you got to hop into the server and restart the services, and or do a backup, right? Because you just wasted a bunch of time. All right, so managing schema objects. Really, this is all about SQL shell. The SQL shell is amazing. I didn't realize it in the beginning, but it is. You have to be on the server. Good question. Excellent question, Tim. Keep me on my toes. Thank you. His question is which server? Like if you have multiple stores, which server do you have to be on? At the site you're doing. So if you're doing a backup at a remote because you're testing something on a remote, then that even if it's only 2 workstations, one is a master, one's a slave. So the master is the server, right? It may be a peer-to-peer server, maybe 2 machines that are exactly the same. One acts as a server, one acts as a client, right? And the client, without the database, is in fact slaved to the master, right? It cannot operate without the other one being turned on. So you have to be on the master, on the server. You have to be where the database is. Now, each location has a machine that performs that task. So if you're at a remote, you have to be on the master machine. If you're at the main office, you have to be on the server. I think we all get that at this point, right? Good question, though. Thank you. All right, so the SQL shell. The SQL shell is the ability to look into the Oracle database. So we have a proprietary Oracle database. We are not allowed to know the secret password to the Oracle database, because then we could go into the Oracle database and start doing Oracle stuff, and we didn't buy this from Oracle, right? So Retail Pro is very protective of the password. I do not know it, and Art, who worked for the developer and does know it, won't share it with me, although I've asked him. He still won't give it to me. He says he'd have to kill me then. Anyway, in here, in the SQL shell, and I'm going to do it old-fashioned, then I'll do it the smarter way. But if you or me are going in here for the first time, we're just going to browse into this thing and we're going to click on files, right? So that's the big file right there, Invin SBS. So the inventory for the subsidiary is basically what they're abbreviating there, Invin SBS. And this is the inventory file. There's your department code, there's your vendor code, right? There's the description 1, 2, 3, 4, attribute size, cost. Hey, wait a second, where's price? There's cost. I don't see price. Shouldn't price be here? Well, can we have more than one price for a given item? Yes, we can. So the price is in the inventory SBS price table, right? So here you see the same SID, so the same system ID for an item, and you see in fact two different prices, right? In two different price levels. I don't know why 5 and 6, but whatever, right? Here you see the same one, right? In 6 different price levels. This is basic database stuff, right? You've got this thing called a SID, and when you click on each of these tables, you'll see that they're connected on that value, right? This item SID is a randomly generated value that's enormously big. I don't know, it's the millionth of the second since the year 1980. I don't know what it is. It's some random generation algorithm, right? That generates a unique value every time. Can be positive or minus, yeah, positive or negative. So anyway, this is the database. Now, if I was looking for the Invin SBS file, I could scroll down and click on it like you just saw me do, right? Or let me click on something else. I could use a command. I could say select asterisk all from invin underscore SBS, right? And then I could click the little lightning bolt here, and it would do the same thing I just did a minute ago, except it would do it faster. Wouldn't have to browse through it, right? So now be careful with this out here. This can get you in a lot of trouble, but there's a lot of good that can be done out here too. So for instance, let's say I wanted to, I want to change a vendor code. I want to make everything that says Fox be VIV. Okay, so what I would normally do, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I want to go through one basic process here, right? So this little blue arrow here is going to give me a new palette, a new thing. I can scroll back up to see the old commands, but I'm going to go to a new one, and I'm going to say select asterisk from invin SBS where vend underscore code, and it's got to be exactly the column header, exactly the name, right? Equals, it is cap sensitive. Programmers don't like to use double quotes. They use single quotes, whatever, right? That's what they do. So show me everything in the inventory where the wend code, nice. Maybe we should try putting a V in there. All right, where the vend code equals Fox, right? Hit the lightning bolt, everything there says Fox, boom, right? Okay, so now I'm gonna grab this condition here, copy. I'm gonna do an update statement, update invin SBS, set vend code if I can type today, equal to VIV, right? Where vend code equals Fox, right? Okay, we're missing, yeah, we're missing an equal sign. Damn it, I hate when it's right. All right. All right, so now we're gonna scroll back up and try this thing here. Show me everything that says Fox. We got nothing, right? Show me everything that says VIV. Now all the Fox and VIV things are now mixed together, right? Now, this is done in the technician's toolkit for your preview purposes, but it's not done in the database. So if I were to pop back in here and say, show me things that say Fox, right now there are things in here that still say Fox. So if I say Fox, I find things that say Fox. Okay, there's only 2, but whatever, right? I thought there were more than that. Weird. All right. Anyway, the point is that until back here, I come down here and say commit, right? And I hit the lightning bolt, it doesn't write the data. You got to commit it to the database. That's the final step. So there's a safety net built into this process that prevents you from doing something really stupid. Because at this point, I could just close out of the technician's toolkit, and it would just all be gone, and I would never have done any damage. You see what I mean? Now, be very careful with this. This is very powerful stuff, and it can get you in huge amounts of trouble, right? I'm just going to tell you. This can definitely get you in enormous amounts of trouble. But, if you were to go out and Google SQL update statement, right? It's not that hard to find, right? The format is out there. Update, table name, set, column equal to value, comma, column. You could do more than one. You could say, do this one to this value and this one to that value, right? Where, and put your condition in, right? It's super easy to find this stuff. Not at all hard. So you guys could bump into this all on your own. You wouldn't even need me, but like I said, this is very powerful. You could do a lot of damage. Definitely worth doing a backup if you're going to try this. But you can fix a lot of things here, right? I could make, let's just take this out, get rid of this. Let's say update invin SBS set description 3 equal to description 2. No condition, right? Boom. It's working, right? The last QL thing says it's working. Now, if I click on that and refresh it, it just did what I asked it to do, didn't it? So I can move everything here over here, then I can move this over here, then I can move something over there, back into here. You see where I'm going? You could fix a lot of things here. There's a lot of really great things you can do with the SQL shell. I wish we had one in version 8, really. Honestly, there are so many times when we had to change one field for all the inventory items or something wacky, and we had to bridge it out, do it in Excel and bridge it back in, right? When we could just come in here and say, hey, just change this field, right? So, all right, we probably spent too much time on that, although useful. Again, this is very useful stuff. You can really, there's a lot of really good things you can do if you need to in here. All right, so popping down into the data management here, there is an archive purge section. An archive purge section that lets you archive and purge and then restore, right? So at some point down the road, we've had Retail Pro 9 for 10 years. We want to drop the first 5 years of data. You could go down and take that historical data documents and you could archive it and purge it. Purging it takes it out of the database. Bye-bye, gone, not reportable, right? So archiving it writes a file that you could be then restored should you ever want to bring it back, right? Now, I've done this a few times. I'm not going to do it now for you because it's a little dangerous. You want to be careful in playing with this. You want to do this in the downtime. You want to make sure you back your data up. You know what I'm saying? But FYI, it's here and it is available. The next section here, inventory and miscellaneous, these two fields, these are probably the handiest two nodes here in the Technician's Toolkit. This is your bag of tools right there. Those two, inventory and miscellaneous. These two are just a bunch of stuff in here. Recalculate company quantity on hand. Recalculate committed. Recalc committed, that's an old 8 series thing. It still works in V9, very useful, right? Rebuild your style links. Adjust the, recalculate the quantity adjustment field table. SRO is done in regular inventory. You don't need it here really. Delete inactive items. There's just a ton of really good stuff in here, right? So in the miscellaneous, here's your delta build, right? Everybody knows what the delta is, right? The delta keeps statistical analysis like turn, gross margin, return on investment, all that stuff, right? That's what the delta does. It keeps the stats. So if your delta's messed up, and then this is how you would reset it, right? So in here, in Retail Pro, if I'm just in Retail Pro, right? Everybody knows where to check the delta, right? The delta is the bottom center of the screen. This delta was last updated on 3/13. So we're not running the schedule here, right? And that delta is quite old, the bottom there. So out here, if I were to go into the delta mode here and say update my delta for yeah, all right, I'll just do this one. I'll do them both, whatever, it doesn't matter. All, and then hit start, it'll go and do a delta update. Now the delta update takes, I don't know, like in a real life situation, maybe 5 minutes. Again, this is a sandbox, right? We don't make transactions on this. So the few transactions we have here, even though we're talking from last March to November, which is like 8 months, took what, 30 seconds? Not a big deal. Now, if you want to update your delta manually, this is nice because it says, hey, the delta was updated, and I get a little box there that says, hey, I'm done, right? If I go out and I go to here and I go like to here and say update my delta here, right? That command, by the way, is not a native button. Since we're in TechSport land, we may as well show you what I'm talking about, right? In the Retail Pro 9 folder, there is a user menu.ini, and this is where you add buttons. And so in here, you can see that the update delta button, it has a switch, run silent. You're not going to see the little thing that says I finished. Now you could delete that S, you can make it run normally, right? And then you would see it. But if you're going to lunch and you want it ready when you get back, you know it's going to take 5 minutes, then just click the silent one, let it run, right? It'll be done when you get back, right? It's not that big a deal. So if we go back in here to inventory and look at the bottom of the screen, so now it says 11:17, right? So it's updated. Now your delta updates through a task in the scheduler every night, right? That's how it updates. Okay, so what else we got here? Well, I guess we got a little bit more of the technician's toolkit. Let's knock that off. Anything else left there that we need to go over? Reanalyze dates. Be careful with the dates. There's two here. There's this one down here. There's this one up here. Well, I think this does the inventory ones, and this does the receiving dates. I could be not sure. This says item receive date. Maybe this one does the other one. This one does the POs. So you got to check the manual on that. And everybody knows how to get to the manual, right? I'm just going to have to point out that My Retail Pro, right? There's a little website. They have a little My Retail Pro website, right? I'm a dealer. I get other options in my screens that you don't get, but everybody can get a login to this, right? You come out here, you click login, it says put your thing in, you say I need a password, you tell them who you are. If you're a licensed user Retail Pro, they give you a login. That's that simple. And out here you have a documentation portal, so I could go out here and look up documentation on V9. So if I said I wanted a tech, toolkit, no results file, nice. Oh, there you go. Technicians, I guess I should have spelled out technician, right? But yeah, always good to have the documentation and the current documentation because they're updating this all the time, right? So we know that this one here, even though it's 2017, it doesn't say 2012, right? This is the last time they updated it. This is the most current one. And you can just download it right from their website. It's a beautiful thing. All right, anyway. Yeah, all right, moving on. There is some customer maintenance here. I have not used that much. I have used the merge customer a lot. So if you have, and everybody does, customers that have, there are two customers that have the same name, and then there's the same customer that's been entered 2 or 3 times, right? So out here in this merge customer thing, you go to the grouping and you say how you want to group. I'm going to say exact match for first and last name. And And be careful because the sidebar menu will not have the buttons you need. You need the analyze button, you need the auto match button, you need the master and the merge. I think that's what you need really. So once you set your grouping here, you click on analyze and it goes and tries to analyze the customers. And this is a pretty clean database because we don't do anything. It's a sandbox, right? So we imported some customers at some point for some reason, and Karen, the sales rep, has put herself in 5 times, right? So I like auto match. Auto match will master and match them for you. So it said, okay, this one's going to be the master, and these here are going to be matched to it, which means these records will all be erased out of the database, and all their history will be migrated over to this record here. Now, if I don't agree with that, if I said, and I'd pick this one just because it's the oldest record, right? It's 2013. But if I said, no, I really want this one, or I want this one, right? I could go ahead and say, okay, make this one a match, right? And then make this one the master. You can't have 2 masters. That will bite you in the butt every time. So you just take off the master, make it be a match, then choose which one will be the master, right? Now, then you have to continue down, through all these different ones, right? And decide who's master and match, right? Now, and when you're done with this, you have to then merge these, right? Oh my gosh, what happened? The requested operation cannot continue while Retail Pro application is in use. Well, I'm the only one using this. What's the deal? This is not tolerant with anything else, including you being in Retail Pro, right? So if I was going to finish this, I need to close out of Retail Pro. Now, another thing to be aware of, if you have remote stores, okay, if you have remote stores, you have to do this at a time that you can then poll the remote stores and execute the same thing at all stores, right? So if you have a main store and you purge customers, it creates a little file that polls down to the store. Then you have to go into the technician's toolkit, and there'll be a pending batch there, and you have to execute the pending batch. Otherwise, those merged customers that you just cleaned up pull back to the main. Very bad, right? So I don't know that we need to continue that per se. I could, and it would clean up the database, but I'm not sure I care that much, and I don't want to waste the time and have us all watch that. That's weird. Not much going on there. There is this here, right? And this is a one-time switch that I like to point out. If you're going to switch from regular store credit to central credit. So FYI, there is something called centrals, which we are not really doing a webinar on, but suffice to say that if I have 2 stores, I have store 1 here and store 2, right? And let's say that the proximity is that they're 10 blocks away, okay? So if I'm doing regular polling, which a polling cycle to go and merge data or synchronize data takes 1 hour. It could be less, but that's our typical setting is 1 hour, right? Well, if they're only 10 blocks apart, I could use my store credit, run to the other store, and use it again before the polling cycle occurred, right? So central credit sets up a central database at the main, and the remote store actually reaches out real time, checks the central database, uses the store credit, and then when they get to the other store, it's already been used because it's all using the same database. You follow? That's what centrals is. So if you're ever in a need to switch over to it, there's that one-time switch that you can come in and say, convert all my store credits to centrals, and fire it off, hit the start button, and it goes. It converts them all for you. Pretty handy. All right, any questions about Technician's Toolkit? I'm going to close it because it's still pretty boring stuff. And I guess we're going to go dive into polling real quick and take a look at some polling. All right, ECM. Come on down. All right, so in the ECM folder, right, we've got a polling folder, and we've got our ECM executable, and we've got our ECM proc executable. If I go into ECM properly, sometime in our lifetime, and I go into my station files, I have a couple of station files. If I click process out, all that you're going to see is the menu is going to go gray while it processes out. Like, I can't tell what it's doing, can I? It's just doing something in the background, which is both good and bad, by the way. We do not want cashiers or people in the store to see polling, right? We just don't want that. So polling is invisible, completely invisible, by the way. If you schedule polling, you will not see it. It will take place in the background. However, from a tech support standpoint, it really sucks when you're trying to troubleshoot something and you want to know, hey, did that work, right? So down here, if I go down to the bottom and say run, give myself a run box, and I say D, is this R? This is R. What are we on here? I think we're on R colon, D colon. All right, well, D colon, backslash ECM. No, we didn't get our D colon in there. Right, backslash ECM. So, and I could set a shortcut up for this. This is painful. Watching anybody type is painful anyway, but especially if they don't type well. Okay, so there are switches right here we want to use, right? So we say, I want to process out, and I want to show, I want to see the progress, right? That's it. Just say you're going to run proc out or proc in with that. Now you might also need to specify what station. So you could say optionally STID, station ID, colon, and up above you see like 001-002H, for instance. So if I was going to do it for one, I would specify, otherwise I would stop at the show and just hit OK. So if I hit this now, it's going to actually bring a window up and show us the progress and show us when it finishes. So let me see if I can find a good example of why that would be useful. Let me grab a file. Let me just get a file here. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so there's a zip code file. That's just a standard US postal zip codes, right? So I am going to drop that into our polling H directory. So when they poll in, they go to in received, right click, paste. Okay, there's our zip code file transferring over to that machine. Now I'm going to come back down here and we're going to go to the run box. And I'm going to change the out to an in. So we are on the right station file, but I want to process in this time. So I'm going to say process in, and we're going to click OK. And so this is a bit more realistic of what a polling would actually look like, right? If you are moving a large inventory file or history files, or if you're reinitializing all the history to a remote store, it's going to take a second to get through, right? It's not going to be like instantaneous like it was a minute ago. So those are just tricks that we can do to follow the path. So obviously it starts in received, it goes to proc in. So as soon as I hit start processing in, it moved that zip code file in here. Then it opened it up and started processing it. Of course, when you process out, like they go to proc out as they're being built, they're being put in here, and as soon as they're ready to go, they put them in the root of the out folder, right? Now we don't have any data to process out. All it gave us was a license file. But there are times when you need, over this weekend doing tech support, I needed a stores file. So we had I don't know if you guys know, and we should probably mention this since this is on tech support, we should probably mention this anyway. So maybe it's a good thing. Does anybody know what an OSID mismatch is? So everybody knows that, well, when Windows has this thing called an operating system ID, and Retail Pro licensing, so my Retail Pro licensing on this box here is in the Retail Pro folder in the Service Manager. Okay, the Service Manager, if we run the Service Manager and sign in, we will find the License Manager, right? So here's our license server, click configure. Takes 20 or 30 seconds to get in every time. Right, so what can happen is, and it did happen this weekend quite maybe too often, Windows does a large update. It changes the Windows OS ID, right? Then Retail Pro, you launch it, it comes up and says, I'm sorry, you can't get into Retail Pro. We think you're a pirate. You have an OS ID mismatch. So then what I did is I went in and I said, okay, reactivate this store. Now, in some cases, that was enough to fix the OS ID mismatch because I just reactivated. I just told the licensing agent what the OS ID is, right? But in the case of remote stores, that's not enough sometimes. Sometimes that causes the stores to be lost. So what I have to do is I have to go to the main and I have to go to ECM and proc out. So when I proc out, mostly when I proc out, let's just see what do we got going. Let's go back into ECM for a second. Might as well do this, right? That's what the webinar is for. So not polling, ECM. Okay, so in ECM, come on. I'm gonna change one of these station files. We need to talk about that anyway. Form view, but we'll just bump through it real fast. If this was a real store and this was not set up to be a real store, it would be more like that, right? All right, so now if I go in there and hit process out, of course now it's invisible and we can't see it. Super annoying. If I go in here and look in hproc out, we see files being created here, right? Yeah, really not much to see there except that they exist, right, so far. And of course the one I'm looking for is not there yet. And of course it's still processing, right? So I'm hoping it'll finish in a second. Maybe I asked for too much data, but what we're looking for is the store file, right? There is a file called stores.xml that can be copied, right? It could be copied from the main and dropped into the remote. If you have remote access, I've been taking files from my desktop, dropping them into this remote machine, right? Copy and paste, right? Not rocket science here. Anybody could do it. All right, this is killing me. I might just have to kill that proc out, right? ECM, we got too many ECMs running. Could kill one of those for sure. ECM proc, end task, run. Probably should be smarter about that. Let's just go get, come on, you can do it. Thank you. Form view. So this profile tells us what we're sending, right? I'm going to turn off all the inventory and all the documents and all the customers. Don't really care about all that, all the security. I'll leave the preferences for now. Save. Okay, so now let's try this the other way. Let's go run, and we're going to change it to be out again. OUT. Let's put ourselves in the right place. Proc out, select all, delete. Okay. Wow, that was pretty fast. Let's see what it did here. It didn't do anything. What's going on with our, we're active. Let's view mobile. Okay. All right. So let's try that. Let's just go down and say run and drop this here. Right, so that's just going to process out everything, right? That's not going to be looking at one particular station or the other, right? That's going to take everybody out. So proc out. Let's see what happens if we do this. All right, so that's kind of what we're looking for. And here's our store file, right? What happened is that these files were created. They did go to the proc out folder. It's just that they went there so fast, and then they got refreshed up to the out folder that we didn't see it, right? Anyway, that's the store file right there. If I were to take this and copy this and drop that into the other side, the remote store, go into polling, go into ECM polling, find the station file. There'll only be one at the remote unless you have like this. This is set up here for handheld scanners, and that's what this station we also do. So that's what these are for. So you could have more than one at the remote, but normal polling, you'd have one that is going to the main, right? Anyway, if you go in and go to in received, right, you just paste that file in, and then you tell it to process in. And you could just tell it to process in by clicking the button. It's not going to take long to process a store file. It's going to be seconds, right? But if you get an OSID mismatch, you go to your licensing tool, you reactivate. If you need to get the store file, you go to the main, you process out, you grab the store file, you bring it over, put it in the in folder and process in. Or you could go to the main, hit process out, right? Let it process out. So when the menu comes back up, it's processed out, right? Then you could, at the remote, do a send receive, right? That would pick all the files up and process them in. And that's far less technical, much easier than what I just explained, right? But it would take longer. So if you had a big line of customers and you had the technical skill to be able to do that, right? Can ECM push layouts through your network also? That's a good question. Good, excellent question, Patrick. Yes and no on that. So we'll get there next, I guess. So let's just take a look at this real fast and finish this stupid thing here. I want to make sure we understand what this is, and then we'll move over to move lists. All right, so in here, you've got two sections, checklist and tools, right? That's what it is. The checklist just says what can go. So from a main to a remote, right? From a main, we send inventory, right? We don't send inventory back up from the remote. We send receipts and vouchers. We send documents, right? So if we're setting these two sides up, the main would look like this. You know, we'd have this and this checked probably, right? And documents for the main, we might have this checked, but we would probably be set like this. Like we would probably only send, well, it's up to you. Some people send all documents to all locations. Other people send only corrections made for that store back to that store. You follow? Now, having all documents at all locations is very nice. It's a sort of a indirect backup, right? So that's your choice. This here pending APR file, that's the merge customer thing. If these aren't going down, then the pending batch isn't going to be there. If you merge customers and you do a process out, a send receive, then you go into Technician's Toolkit at the remote, there should be a pending batch if the pending APR files are going down. Obviously, exported reports can go down, right? Customers, yeah, all in diff, pretty much common. Employees, typically we send the details and the groups down. If you manage security at the main, which most people do, because if you don't manage at the main, you got different passwords at different stores, right? If you manage it at the main, I could go from one store to the next and my password's the same, right? So these would be all going down from the main to the remote, and all these would not be coming back up from the remote. However, the remote, all the documents would be coming up, right? Anyway, preferences, these two are preferences. These usually go down from the main only, not back up, right? Down here under profile tools, this decides who's in charge. That's what this does. So down here, if you've got manage checked off, what that means is I don't accept inventory quantity and cost changes from you. I'm managing that. I get to make those changes. You don't. That's what that means. So a main typically would be checked off all the way down, right? All these manages would be checked off, and none of these accepts down here would be checked off. We wouldn't accept these changes from the remote. And the remote would be exactly the opposite. Remote would be accepting everything from the main and not managing anything, probably, right? So what this gets into is like who can edit inventory and who can't, right? So real quick, a scenario, I had a client who had like one store here, and this was in like Sausalito, and then over here in San Francisco, they had 3 more stores. They had a warehouse. They had a warehouse. So they wanted to be able to edit inventory here and here, but not at the stores. You follow? So in their station file, in here, they accepted for the one warehouse that was the remote to the other warehouse, right? Because one of the warehouses was the main, one was a remote. They did not manage descriptions. They let descriptions come in from that one, but the other stations they did manage. They did not allow the other ones to make those choices or build items. Now the only issue you have with that, by the way, is just that there are a couple of areas, department codes, vendor codes, scales, pretty much, and employee security, I guess. There's no difference setting on these, right? It's all or nothing. So with DCSs and vendor codes, you have to enter those at the main, period. Because of polling, the file overwrites every night. With inventory, right? With inventory, we do manage differences, right? We can go in here and say we're managing differences, and we can send pictures, by the way. But so that one there, you could build a new item for an existing department or vendor and send that into the main, and the main would accept it if the settings were correct. All right, so now let's talk about moving files around and this layout question. In here, first off, let's just establish the layouts, doc designs, plugin files, configuration files. Those are all configurations. They're not data. So what polls? Data polls. Departments poll, receipts poll, inventory items poll, customers poll. That's all data. Configurations do not poll by default. But it's a good question, Patrick. So what if we have to send new layouts out to the store? What if we have to send new doc designs? Now, doc designs are easier, so let's start with doc designs. There is a module right here inside polling that lets you do that, right? It's called Move List. So over here on the sidebar, we click Move List. We come in here, we say we want to make a new move list. We want to, we get a split screen here. We want to add a file. I'm going to start with a doc design. And a doc design is not in the ECM folder. It's in the Retail Pro 9 design folder, doc design, right? So if I'm going to send a receipt design, it's going to be in the receipt folder. Okay, here's a receipt design, right? Boom, I click on that. Now, if I'm sending it from the main to the remote, I need to say where I'm going to put it at the remote. Now, we typically set up all of our stations with standard R drive mappings. So it's up to you to know what your mapping is at the store. But it's better if, when you configure your stores, if everybody uses the same path. That's going to save you a lot of trouble downstream, right? So in a store that's say small, like that, just two stores, two registers, right? We'd have workstation 1 here, and in workstation 1 we would have a partitioned R drive, right? And we'd have a C drive, right? And we'd have a little Q drive, which is a backup and restore thing, which we probably should mention. And then we got WS2, right? And in WS2, we would have our little C drive, we'd have our Q drive, and then we would have a D drive, and we would map over from WS2 to WS1 a network R drive, right? That's typically how we've done it. So if this was a bigger operation and this was an actual server, again, there would be a native R drive on the server, and all the workstations down here would be mapped back to that server with an R drive, right? Now, in that scenario, I could send something from the R drive here and tell it to put it on the R drive at the store. You follow? So in that case, you could just copy this over here and paste it over there, and you wouldn't have to worry about the drive letter. Now, if you're on an R drive at the main and they're on a D drive or a C drive at the remote, then you're going to have to go in here and change the drive letter, right? Like that, or whatever it actually is, right? Then down here, you say who you're sending it to. So I'm going to say I'm going to send it to this one here, but not to the other one. And we click generate move list. All right, so this station has a pending move list. This one does not. Now the next polling cycle, this would go, and it would overwrite the file at the other end. So sending files to the remote is easy. This could be a doc design in Retail Pro. It could be a PDF. It could be a policy and procedure manual that you want to have in the R drive under policies and procedures, right? It could be whatever you want to send. Now let's talk about layouts. Okay, so layouts. Let's go look at the layout folder. All right, layouts. Okay, what happens in layouts, I'm just going to copy and cheat here a little bit so we can get the right presentation. Okay, so we're going to say pick on you guys because you're helping me and you're being so nice and asking questions. I really appreciate it, by the way. It's tough when you're the only guy talking. All right, so each person who signs on to this workstation is going to get a profile under their name, right? So sysadmin signed in, and in this scenario, Patrick and Tim have signed in, right? So they all have their own folder. So what's the difference between these files and these files down here? Well, these files down here are the default files that get copied in to make that profile. You follow? So when you're updating the layout, you're going to have to write a move list that would update each and every person's by name subdirectory inside the layout folder. That's a little undoable. Okay, I'm just going to tell you that's not a good option, right? So when you're doing layouts, here's what you do. You build a new layout, right? You go into your layouts folder where you built it, you find the layout you're building, right? You copy that. You take it up someplace and paste it to a place where a folder of your desire, you rename it to be layouts, the root name of the layouts folder, right? Then probably you want to zip this, right? You probably want to add this to an archive or send to a compressed zip folder, right? Then move the zip folder to the remote store, right? Put it on, Arcle and install layouts. Drop it in there with a unique file name, right? Then dial into the remote store, unzip your layouts folder and copy it, right? then go into your Retail Pro folder, rename the existing layouts folder, right? So I'm just going to rename this one to 11/17/20, the day I took it out of use, and I'm going to paste in the new layout folder. So the old layout folder would have everybody's name in there, right? The new layout folder is not going to have anybody's name in there. But as they sign on to Retail Pro, and so of course this is open. That's a mistake, by the way. That's a rule like 101. Don't be driving the car while you're playing with layouts, right? So, and that's why, because it pushes the layouts back and reestablishes the old layouts, and that basically overwrites what you're trying to do, right? So you get the heck out of Retail Pro if you're moving layouts around. Now, if I go back into Retail Pro and sign in, it'll actually build me a new profile. If we can get into Retail Pro, that is, soon. So, yeah, I agree with you, by the way, Patrick. Yeah, Patrick says he was hoping it was easier and less steps, and I totally agree with you. And on that point, if you're going to have to remote dial in and you can copy a zip file down in the remote session, is it really worth doing a move list for layouts? I'm going to have to agree on all those points. Layouts, unfortunately, are not easy enough to manage in that sense. So you see that in the background here, as I signed in, it built me a new layout, and it built me a layout from these new default files. But with layouts, not so much. You pretty much got to dial in. Now, what you can do is dial in to the master workstation, replace the master layouts, right? And so what I mean is that if we're using like this scenario here, if we have workstation one and workstation one is the master, if I were to put new layouts on this hard drive, and then I were just to remove or delete the layout folder on the D drive, so there was no layout folder at all. And if this Retail Pro on Workstation 2 ran using the executable here on the R drive, it would pull layouts across. So basically you drop the new layouts in, you get rid of all the layout folders, you rename them, you do not delete them, just in case you screwed up, you want to be able to go back. And then they just build them all automatically, copy and paste, all after editing and remove the same. Yeah, What you're saying, Patrick, is you're copying and pasting to each directory, so you're going in to the old layout folder and you're copying, like you're taking the new layouts, like the new layouts in here, you're going select all and copy, and then you're going into each folder and pasting them in, because you could do that, totally could do that. But it's easier to just copy the new master up into a new layout folder that is now the new master. And then as they sign on, it copies them for you automatically, right? It just does all the work for you. So anyway, that's where I would go with that. I would not update everybody's individual profile, because I mean, if you sign on to 10 different machines, I got a Jeff profile on 10 different machines. That's a lot of work. Do you need to get rid of the oldest layouts then? No, you don't get rid of them. You rename them. Just in case you screw up. Like right now, I could delete this layout folder and I could rename this one back to layouts and restore all the old layouts, right? So, if you get in here and you find you've got a layouts 11/17, a layouts August 23rd, a layouts June 26th, a layouts January 7th, yeah, I probably would drop the bottom three, right? But I would keep the most recent, the one that I knew was a bird in the hand that worked. So if I make a bunch of changes to the layout and I totally screw something up, which is possible, I'm a human being, I want to have that other layout that I already know is working to go back to, right? Right, so that is better, yes. So set the layout, set set it and then rename the old ones. So not, yes, that's right. So it's not pathable. Correct. Exactly. Pathrick. Right. Now you just want to make sure that in that scenario, I'm just going to come back here for a second. On this example, on this workstation, I would have a Retail Pro 9 folder here, and I would have one here. So when I right-click this shortcut and look at the properties, is it coming off the D drive or is it coming off the R drive? If all your workstations are coming off the R drive, they're all coming off a central drive, then you drop the new layout in the master server. You just rename all the layout folders on every workstation, and they all pull from the server. They're all coming off the R drive. If they're coming off their local drive, you got to put the new master on the local drive. So, for instance, I have another client down in Trinidad, and she has like a big corporate location and multiple stores, right? And in the corporate warehouse, she has the offices upstairs and she has the warehouse downstairs, and she wants one layout here for the offices. She wants another layout for the point of sales, and she wants yet a third layout for the warehouse people because she says she doesn't trust them. So she has in Retail Pro gone in to her employee management employees, and she said, make me a new profile. One is called, one's called stores, right? One's called warehouse, and one's called office. And so on her workstation, when she logs into stores, that's her master store POS layout, right? And then she copies that down to the store, resets all the workstations, and then that's how she manages them. So in that scenario, the reason I bring this up is because in the warehouse is in fact one big network, right? All computers are connecting to the same server, including the ones on the floor in the warehouse. So she has to drop the new master into each local drive. Does that make sense to everybody? So those 4 warehouse ones are actually managing their own layouts, but they're the only ones. The rest of the office is all managed off the server, as is the stores. The stores, you drop it into the server at each store, and all the workstations then just rename their layout folders. They all get new layouts that way. They're all mapped the same way. So these are the only ones that run local, and then the 4 ones they do the processing at. So anyway, another nice, neat little point though to make about this is if you as a manager have like your own layout, right, and you've got some really interesting things you've done and it's totally separate, you could bring that layout up and paste it in here. Now, if I go to workstation 5 and I rename the layout folder and I sign in as Patrick, it's going to pull that, not this. You follow? It's going to pull your custom, it'll always pull your profile over the default, if that makes sense. And yes, I agree with you. It's not a perfect world, but it is a better alternative than updating everybody's individual layout every time. That's just an enormous amount of work. And you're dialing into every single workstation and updating 30 profiles is just ridiculous. So don't want to do that. But also, like I said, you can have a roving profile too. You can drop, like you could have your profile drop it into to the master layouts, right, as it goes out. So you got a default and you have your profile only. Then when you sign in at the store, you get your own layout, right? That's kind of cool if you want to go that way. All right, so back to polling. Is there anything else in polling? Yes. You know, real quick here, common polling issue. There's 2 pieces. So if we look over here at the polling menu, we've got a send receive and we've got a start exchange, right? So the start exchange, that's the catcher. The send receive is the pitcher, okay? So many times the exchange service here, you can right click and end this task, or go into the service and shut down the service and restart it either way. If you end it here, you could then just start it over here, right? Sometimes the catcher, the exchange, the ECM exchange that runs native at the main typically gets locked up. It gets confused. And and you just need to shut it down and restart it, right? That's another first thing I would do. If you're not polling, and all stores are not polling, you're just not polling, then I would go into the server, shut down the ECM exchange, and then hit start exchange, right? Just start it up again. And then try polling, try one of the remote stores polling, right? So the polling, of course, when you have a main location and you have stores polling in, this is a static IP. These are probably dynamic IPs. So the stores poll the main because the main can accept concurrent connections, and the stores, if we poll out, we have to do one, then the other, then the other, then the other in sequence. Whereas the poll stores can all drop data off. We can accept many connections at the same time. Typically, I find that the maximum, based on your bandwidth, is around 15 or 20. You're not going to be, if you get more than that and your bandwidth isn't really big, you're going to jam up polling and you're not going to poll. So if you have 40 stores, you might have to break it into half or thirds, right? Do these for first 15 in the first 10 minutes, and then do 15 more in the next 10 minutes, and so on. Okay. Beyond that, I guess, there is the ever popular, truly exciting, not so exciting actually, logs. You can view logs that basically will tell you everything that happened during polling. Can be very useful if you find that there's a certain file that's causing an error. It's good to look at and know that up front, right? Beyond that, I'm going to say call TechSport. Well, I will mention the other common problem with polling is IP address changes. So real quick here, since we're going to run out of time pretty quick here, but let's understand real quick the whole internal external IP address thing, right? So don't save. So right here in the back, well, all right, so we got a computer that's a server, right? We got a store over here, right? And we have in both locations a router modem, something going on here, right? And we want to poll from here, right here, from here up onto the internet and down, and we want to get to here, right? That's where we want to get to. Okay, now out here in our polling config, right, in ECM, we say stations form view. We say the IP address for my store is X, and when I'm doing that, I'm saying it's this IP address here. Well, what do I mean by that? If I pop in here, nice, that's the music. What are we listening to? Smashing Pumpkins radio. Nice. What is my IP, right? So that's my external IP right there, right? Okay, there's a command prompt, right, on the network. So if I say IP config, enter, that's my internal IP address. So this computer in Big Hairy Dog internal network is sitting at 10.20.30.137. But external is 216.31.243.162, right? How do we connect those two, right? So we connect those two through what's called port forwarding. And I can't really show you that per se, other than to say that the router will have a configuration, and you can drop into your configuration on your router, and you can set up either port forwarding or pinholing. There's a lot of names for it. But basically you say, when you see something coming in on the polling port, which is 20,000, so polling uses port 20,000 or 20,010, whatever you set it to in the config, but it defaults to 20,000. When you see something coming in on this port, send it to 10.20.30.137. That's what port forwarding is. So if your external IP address changes, so if your ISP is being nasty and they change your IP address, then you need to call them up and say, give me my IP address back, or you got to go out to the stores and put the new IP in all the stores, right? So that's why we have a static IP at the main. We pay for the extra few bucks a month to have a static IP that is the same always. And that's why we don't have to pay for one in the stores, right? We just get a dynamic IP. They're placing the phone call. They're not receiving it, right? We are the ones receiving. So obviously the same thing can happen though. if we are in fact the same static IP address is in place, but something happens to the local IP and we change the internal IP, we're no longer at 137, then boom, port forwarding blows up and doesn't work, and I have to go back into the router and reconfigure to the new location or put the old IP back, right? So when you're thinking about doing changes on the network, be very aware of the polling situation and how you can stop polling, right? Or just have a tech, one of my techs help you with the polling, right? I mean, if you're going to change your network around and you got polling going on, it's worth setting up a time to have a tech available. They'll only take like 15, 20 minutes to make sure that the IP address system is set correctly and that you're good. Trying to think what else there is in tech support that I could go over, but I can't really think of much else. Anything left in our checklist of exciting things here? What do we got here? Yeah, we did command line processing stations overview. Yeah, setting up station files for different sides. Scheduler. The scheduler, we did not look at that, but we should real quick. Just go into the Windows, type task, right, and go to the task scheduler, not the task manager, and that's where your scheduling is. So when you're looking at polling, you also want to look in here and see if the tasks ran, right? Now, normally what we do is, like if you're at the top, you can't create a new folder. You have to be on the library. Then you can right click and say new folder, and then there would be a Retail Pro folder in here like that, right? And in the Retail Pro folder, we would have inserted the polling tasks. So I'm going to say import a task. Do I even have a task to import? Let's see. Deinstall. No, we don't even have any tasks loaded here, do we? That's kind of annoying. Normally we would see tasks in here. We have any tasks at all? Okay, there's a task, right? So the operation completed successfully, right? You can see over here whether this thing ran or not, right? And so normally we're going to have in the Retail Pro folder, we're going to have index, tune, delta build, maybe SRO update, maybe run a report, maybe process in and process out, or exchange, right? And a remote would have 2 exchanges. So you'd want to come in and look for those tasks and make sure that they're set up correctly. The process in, not so much anymore. The process in now, of course, there's a rule for that. So in your options, workstation preferences under rules, we don't really need to set a task up to process in, because we can just check off the little checkbox here under rules that says process in immediately after send receive. So as soon as I receive a file, just do it, man. Just bring it in, right? So what they typically do is they set a schedule to process out at the remote and send receive, and then it just hits the main and processes in, and then they send a process out at the main, and then the remote does another send receive to pick those files up, and it automatically processes in, right? So instead of 6 tasks, now it's down to 4 because the process ends get executed automatically. But it's also good to know if you're troubleshooting a situation and you want to see the file go all the way through step by step to make sure it's working, then turn this off, right? Don't let this auto consume the file. If you want to see it when it gets to the other side, and many times, I'm going to tell you, many times I visually wanted to see it. I say, okay, here's the file. Let's send it. Boom. Okay, there it is. Okay, let's process it in. Okay, I know it got processed in, right? So it's a little anal retentive, but when you really are troubleshooting and you want to make sure it's working, that's what you do. You turn that thing off, but make sure you turn it back on, because it's super handy in regular polling to have that turned on. All right. Any other questions or scenarios in the last couple of minutes here that I could answer for anybody? Wow, we actually went the whole 2 hours. That's unusual, and you guys actually hung in with me too. So that's a big thank you to you guys and everybody for hanging in there, because this has got to be the most boring webinar probably, or among the most boring webinars, right? Basic tech support. So, all right, if there's no other questions, I am going to tell you guys to have a good rest of your day, and everybody, please stay safe out there. It's just crazy times for everybody. Thank you very much, Kat and Patrick and Tim. I appreciate the comments. It's nice to have a little bit of feedback sometimes. All right, you guys all take care. I'm going to say goodbye now. Thank you.